On the dawn of the summer of 224 BC, Dymas makes the final jump of his journey, landing on the shores of the tiny island of Rhodes. The small island also hosted a good mix of mercenaries, including the Cretan archers of legend. Dymas dismisses 2 of his archers and replaces them with the elite mercenaries, and sets up camp on the beaches, ready to besiege the city the next season. To the north of the empire, Xanthippus' spies infiltrate Kyne and find it delightfully bare of troops. The Dacian general was well out of Lafinez the assassin's skill range, but he was perfectly capable at burning down buildings, so down goes the shrine to Bendis. A little to the south, Hero and Nestos continued their way to Salona. Near the former Thracian capital, the Scythians had been spotted moving, and with the changing of seasons it was confirmed that those barbarians were up to no good, though at the very least their small force had removed themselves from Greek land. Sending his spy ahead to infiltrate the town, Hero completes his journey to Salona, and besieges it for what would hopefully be the last time. The gates were open, and with a defence of lowly warbands, Salona would not remain in Gaul hands for much longer. As the Spartans approached, the Cretans softened up the warband that stood before the open gate, the number of Gauls steadily decreasing with each volley of arrows. The Spartans make their way through the town entrance, shoving aside bodies as they made their way to their positions in the street. Warband would try and throw themselves against the Spartans, but through the rain of arrows and the steely gaze of the Spartans, the Gaul break and run almost immediately. Reaching the end of the street, the Spartans allow the Gaul to come to them, futilely trying to push through the line of Spartan spears. The first unit of warband broke, and the second not too far behind in doing so too. The Spartans pursued them onto the plaza, some engaging in hand-to-hand combat, while the rest held formation, occasionally jabbing their spears forward until eventually the last Gaul fell, and Salona once more rightfully belonged to the Greeks. The people of Salona were happy to see Hero once more, and as such Hero was happy to leave the population be. With the town now firmly within the Greek Empire and the threat of the Gaul invaders long gone, Hero steps outside and hires the local mercenaries to care for his reclaimed town.
Yes, my lord, orders, splitting the troops.
With that affair settled, Hero, his son and army make their way south, falling short of the rebel army that stood before them. Sending his agents ahead, Dymas was ready to take another city for his father's empire. The gates had been opened, and with a majority of the garrison made up of peasants, Rhodes did not have any hope of staying within rebel hands. The peasants stood before the Greeks, and the archers easily tear them down with their arrows. With the first line of defence out the way, the Spartans entered the city and advanced towards the plaza. Believing that the approaching militia hoplites to be no threat, the hoplites turned their backs on the marching rebels. Although after losing 8 men, the Spartans turn around and deal with the inferior hoplites. One last unit of militia remained guarding the plaza, and while the unit of Spartans held them in place, a second marched through the militia's unguarded sides. The city was all but theirs, only a few peasants remained in the city to provide resistance, though the Spartans were quick to surround them and eliminate the remaining rebels. With that, another city belonged to the Greeks. The larger population is exterminated to increase the overall happiness, and another wonder of the world is acquired by the Greeks. The Colossus of Rhodes increased naval trade, and with plentiful trading ports around the empire, gold would surely pour into the Greeks' pockets at a higher rate. From Termon, a team of armoured hoplites join with Antilochus and make for the eastern ports. With enough peasants in reserve, Xanthippus was finally ready to leave Campus Yazyges for Kyne. His agents had informed him of a small army that stood in the way of the town and recommended that the general take the longer path to the north. While on his travels to the mountainous pass, Xanthippus stopped part way. A small force in the way was no reason for him to take an extra season unnecessarily travelling, and makes his way for the southern pass. Gathering the last of his troops, Dymas once more boards his fleet, though the trip this time was significantly shorter. A quick hop over and Dymas had Halicarnassus under siege, and for once the Greeks were on the offence in attacking. although Dymas quickly realised that he'd forgotten to bring his agents with him. The ship returns to Rhodes and picks up the two men, the spy immediately infiltrating the city and the assassin joining Dymas. The city is besieged once more, though this time the gates remained closed. Back to Rams it is then. The rebel army just wasn't shifting, so Hero would just have to remove them, he supposed. The peasants and heavy peltasts would be no problem for his army. An annoyance, if anything. The peltasts melt under the Cretans' fire, the last of their men easily going down, and the peasants shuffling forward ready to be taken down by the archers. Softened from the archers, and fleeing aim Nestos chases down the last few remaining peasants in the name of experience. With the last rebels down, another victory belonged to the father and son. With the way cleared, Hero continues his trek towards the port of Thessalonica. During the winter he finishes his journey and boards his own set of ships destined for the east, though he would not be able to go until his agents caught back up with the army. To the north, Xanthippus continued his own journey across the snowy plains of eastern Europe, passing by the small Dacian force his agents had warned of. Aquincum, it appeared, had also gained a few reinforcements while Xanthippus travelled,
He won't hit a thing.
though the nearby assassin easily removed the general that occupied the town. Back in Greece, Antilochus boards his own fleet in the port of Athens, and slightly to the east Dymas begins the assault on Halicarnassus, having both rams and the gates open at his disposal. A small team of Spartans approached the city from the south, backed by a team of archers. The march was easy and they faced no resistance on entering the city. As the Spartans reached the plaza, hillmen charged into their side. Suffering nary a scratch, the Greeks turned to face their foes, the archers supporting from the rear. The Pontic infantry fall easily before the Spartans, but the bronze shields were a little tougher, but not tough enough to withstand the onslaught of Greeks. One final bronze shield remained of Halicarnassus, and the Spartans knock him down with next to no effort. Another city for Dymas, another population to call, and another wonder for the Greeks to benefit from. The mausoleum of Halicarnassus provided a reduction on build time for large projects, and with cities all around the Greek Empire steadily growing larger by the year, this wonder would surely help with their development. To the north, the eldest of Sparta finishes his journey to the Dacian town and lays it under siege. The spies had done good work, the gates were opened and they provided very detailed reports on the garrison within the town. The town held a good composition of troops, as well as hosting their own ballista crew. The Greeks approached the town from the east, south and west, although the southern team faced the heaviest resistance with the ballista crew zeroing in on the hoplites. The approaching team loosen their formation and race for the walls, and the archers get to work removing the crew. With their arrows alight, the archers try to permanently take out the artillery pieces, but in the end all that they successfully do is make ballista crew barbecue. The hoplites advance on the plaza from each direction, pinning the remaining Dacians between their spears. The archers, as always, were providing covering fire from the rear. Only a few of the barbarians remained, and the swarms of gold were easily taking care of them. The last two warbands stood valiantly before the hoplites, even taking down one before they too are effortlessly cut down by the Greeks. The setting sun perhaps an omen for the future of the Dacians. Xanthippus lays claim to another Dacian settlement and enslaves the population, for while they may have been happy enough, the general did not intend to stay long. In fact, once his army had settled in, Xanthippus took a small trip to the surrounding lands to gather mercenaries to care for the city while he and his troops made for Batavium, where a ship awaited them. From Thessalonica, with all occupants now on board, they set sail for the coast off of Pergamum, and not quite making landfall this year. In order to protect Hero's fleet from stray ships, nearby Greek fleets block the way to the Aegean Sea. With peasants now ready to occupy Halicarnassus, Dymas leaves the city for his next target of conquest. He had a long march ahead of him to reach the city of Tarsus, which lay on the edge of the Egyptians' empire. He comes to a stop outside of Sardis. His travels are done for the season and checks what mercenaries were available. With his own force already marching on and his siblings now behind schedule, it would be wise to hire out the mercenaries to bolster the forces of Halicarnassus should Pontus seek to reclaim their city. 222 BC comes to its end, and it appeared that the Gaul were not done with Massilia. A spy infiltrates its walls, shortly followed by besiegement. Xanthippus finally makes it to his fleet, and the assessment of the besieging Gaul army was almost complete, and from what the agents could so far tell was that these men would not be as easily as repelled as the last. Hero makes landfall and besieges Pergamum, but quickly lifts it when he realised he had forgotten to send his spy in first. The city had the nice surprise of being lightly guarded and containing a general. Dymas got to work right away, noting that there was also a rival assassin, but he could wait. With a swing of his club, the Pontic general was no more. With the city now infiltrated and a little emptier, Hero once more besieges the city, its gates now wide open and welcoming. The Cretans easily reduced the number of Pontic heavy cavalry as they passed by, and with no other resistance the Spartans easily entered the city, the archers dealing with what remained of the cavalry. The Spartans lined up before the plaza and the archers shoot down the Pontic captain. With the remaining phalanx pikemen held by the Spartans, the Cretans moved their way to the back so they could shoot the phalanx in the rear. Try as they might, the pikemen were not able to take down any more of the Spartans before they were slain. Pergamum is captured and the previously discovered assassin is politely kicked out from the city, saved from the fate that befell the rest of his previous home. Dymas continues east, his current leg passing with little fanfare. The new environment a curiosity to he and his troops. From the Aegean Guard, Antilochus makes landfall in the east, ready to hold Pergamum when Hero leaves. The troops of Massilia were in a fight of their lives. They had 1 to 3 odds against them, but the Gaul generals were no one special, barely scraping by with their ability to command, and Massilia only needed to repel their attackers, not defeat them, and a weakness lay within the warband and skirmishers. Every single troop aside from the captain left the city gates and lined up before the Gaul. Catavignus came charging down the hill into the group of 4 peasants. The peasants raced to surround the Gaul general. While they may not have had the arms or armour, they certainly had the numbers, though it was to no avail. Peasants simply stood no chance against heavy cavalry. Back with the main line of Gaul, the skirmishers had exposed themselves and were in the perfect position for the barbarian cavalry to charge in and take them out. They break but soon recover and the song and dance happens once more. Vercingetorix came forth from his line and stopped before the Greek peasants, teasing and tempting them, as if to say, "Come and get me." The peasants take his bait and charged towards the isolated general, surrounding him on all sides, the barbarian mercenaries not too far behind. Just as the mercenaries arrive, and the general having only lost 1 man, the peasants break and run. The mercenaries were concerned seeing their fellow soldiers running, but still they charge into the still exposed general, hoping that their own weapons will do better. But the panic clogging the air was too great, and so too do the mercenaries break one by one, retreating back to the safety of the city walls. With everyone back within the city, the sally was ended with limited success.
Mercenaries.
130 men in exchange for 900 was hardly a good equation, and they had barely made a dent in the Gaul army.
matter how hard fought.
It was clear the Greeks would not keep hold of Massilia, and so the army of Rome moves north to Arretium, ready for when a general would come and collect them. Winter had arrived, and from Patavium Xanthippus makes his first hop to the port of Ariminum. With peasants ready and Antilochus arriving in the city soon, Hero leaves Pergamum, and Dymas continues his trek through the desert. From Segesta stalks an assassin, his mission to ensure that Catavignus breathes his last breath sooner rather than later. In the summer, Alcides completes his journey, sneaking up behind the Gaul general, but unfortunately he fails the mission and both generals continue to besiege Massilia. Antilochus makes it to Pergamum, soothing the population's woes, and Hero travels to Sardis. In front of Dymas stood a Pontic army and were quite inconveniently in the way. Dymas moves in for the attack and pursues when the Pontics run. Chariots, a unit of beauty and grace. Being that they hosted archers, the chariots would remain at a distance, and so the militia cavalry are deployed. The fragile cavalry fall easily from the javelins and Cretan arrows. The Greek infantry advanced upon their foe, and the militia cavalry remained on the edges, picking off stragglers. The Spartans surrounded the phalanx pikemen, the Greeks cut through the eastern men with ease. And before long the pikemen are fleeing and the cavalry begin their pursuit. Joined by militia, Dymas helps take down the last few men of the Pontic army.
This is a heroic victory, worthy of great soldiers.
He loses just shy of 100 men, but it was good practice for his men. The way now clear, Dymas continues his march to Tarsus. In the Adriatic Sea, Xanthippus plots his course for Sparta, steadily getting closer to the eastern lands. Time was running out for Massilia, the odds were growing against them, and the Gaul now had an arsenal of siege equipment to choose from. This would be their last chance to repel the Gaul before they would be forcibly invaded. The skirmisher warband are once more drawn from the Gaul's line, and the barbarian cavalry ran in to take out the Gaul weak spot. And while their first charge was successful, when they pulled back for another charge, they break and rout. The Gauls, sensing the Greeks' weakness, charge into the line of peasants, easily breaking their wills. Any attempts at counterattacks were quickly thwarted. Followed by Catavignus, the troops of Massilia retreat back to the city. There was not much more they would be able to do. The fleeing Greeks were easy pickings for the Gaul general, as he languidly sat upon his mount, lazily swinging his sword. With a heavy heart of despair, the gates of Massilia slammed shut, quite possibly for the last time, for no doubt that Massilia was lost to the Greeks. As the summer ebbs to its end, the Gauls seal the fate of Massilia. Not even courage and heart would be able to save them now. It appeared that not even the wall that had once kept them safe were their own now. The barbarian mercenaries surrounded the breach in the defences. The Gauls' light cavalry were the first to make their entrance, and with a mighty cry every Greek man on the streets charged into the invaders. The light cavalry were quickly cowed, but the heavy infantry that followed on their heels would be another matter entirely. Chosen swordsmen and naked fanatics would be their next foes. They hoped that their sheer numbers alone would be enough to send them retreating. Even though the gates were opened for the Gaul, they still used their siege equipment. 2 towers and a set of ladders approach the limestone walls, and the awaiting peasants get into position. It appeared that sheer numbers did not do the trick, and what remained of the barbarian mercenaries and peasants on the streets were sent running for the plaza. The entryway of the city was clear of Greeks, and the Gaul had free rein to enter at their leisure. The peasants on the wall were unable to repel their attackers and fell fighting to the death, and all that remained of the Greek force of Massilia were fighting for their lives on the plaza. The Gaul general cut through the Greeks with insultingly little effort, and he would continue to do so until his fellow general arrived and well and truly sealed the fate of the Massilian Greeks. 3 peasants remained fighting on the plaza, futilely stabbing at the heavy cavalry. 2 remained, and 1. The last peasant falls and Massilia was lost to the Greeks and once more belonged to the Gaul. The pirates sent their condolences by relentlessly pestering the Greek fleets.
Disengage! No more moves, sir! Our ships are under attack!
A potential suitor is turned down based on the drill master trait, and news of Massilia's loss is spread amongst the empire. The Greeks may have lost 1 city, but there were still many, many more to conquer, starting off with Sardis. With a spy infiltrated into the city, Hero lays siege to the Pontic town, and with only a wooden wall and the gates wide open, it would only make sense for he and his army to waltz right in. The Spartans make their way through the streets, the Cretans not too far behind, and come face to face with one of the 2 units of Eastern infantry defending the town. With the loss of only a single Spartan, both units of Eastern infantry were severely reduced, and sent running, their exposed backs filled with arrows as they ran. What few that made it back to the plaza were swiftly taken care of by the archers, until finally the last man falls and victory was theirs. Hero enters the city and contemplates what to do with the populace, coming to the decision that the town's number was small enough already, and leaves them be. And with the capture of Sardis, 4 out of the 7 wonders of the ancient world belonged to Hero. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus would surely help convert the peoples of the newly captured cities to a more agreeable religion. With the people of Sardis seeming happy enough, Hero and his army prepare to move on to their next conquest. Peasants from Halicarnassus are moved in to have some sort of garrison available. Hero and Amnestos too would have a long trek to their next target of Massacre. The city may have been lost to the Greeks, but they were not done with the city. It was fortunate that the agents of the city had survived its invasion, and now they sought revenge. Amphidamos had not been able to help his fellow assassin while trapped in the city. With a single swing of his club, one of those that had been responsible were now gone. Xanthippus still had far to sail, but with each season he got closer to his goal, stopping part way to merge with another fleet to bolster their strength and continue for Sparta.
Combining fleet!
In the east, another army fought to stand in Dymas' way, though this time it would be the Egyptians. Considering that Dymas was to be waging war with them soon, it would only be polite to give them a little forewarning now and declare war against them. The small force retreats further down the valley and Dymas pursues. Either way, they were still blocking his path, and he would be able to sample the Egyptians' force before engaging in a proper battle against them. The 2 armies stood facing each other, and with no ranged units of their own, the Egyptians stood feebly under the rain of arrows, the chariots falling apart with ease. Bored of this war of attrition, the Greeks advanced, pulling the approaching chariots into their Spartans. With much glee from the Greek men, the ornate cavalry units broke apart like fine glass when coming into contact with their spears. The fleeing chariots find some success in taking down Spartans with their scythed wheels, but with a quick few jabs of spears, the Egyptian cavalry goes down. The last few men are chased down, and Dymas wins his first of many victories against the Egyptians. With the roadblock now out of the way, Dymas could continue on for Tarsus, targeting the small army that stood just outside the walls, though the fight would have to wait until the next season. Come summer, it was inevitable that something like this would eventually happen. The local diplomat makes his way over to the besieging army and offers them a little monetary motivation to leave. 30,000 denarii? Mere pocket change. Theras accepts the Dacian price, and the once troublesome army is no longer a problem. With his agents trailing behind, Hero continues the march to Massacre. Another year and he would be there.
Who shall die this day?
Dymas attacks the smaller of the Egyptian forces, but wisely they retreat behind the city, and Dymas had no choice but to besiege Tarsus. What a shame. With wooden walls and the gates wide open, Dymas couldn't see more of an open invitation for invasion. The more expendable militia cavalry are sent ahead of the rest of the Greek force to whittle down the elite pharaoh's bowmen, and without a single loss the bowmen are sent away from the city gates. Though in the excitement of taking out Egyptians, a unit of militia got themselves stuck within the city, getting caught between several units of heavy cavalry that cut down the missile cavalry with little effort. With most of the infantry now softened by arrow fire, the Spartans entered the city. And while they were surrounded on both sides, the Spartans did not worry, knowing that they were the superior troops. With the streets now partially cleared, the advance through the city could now begin. Those who stood in the way the Spartans bulldozed through with little effort or fought, the Egyptians falling beneath the Greeks with little fanfare. The Greeks make it to the plaza, and perhaps not hearing the tales from the west that speak against this action, the Egyptian general charges into the Spartans. And though he may have lasted longer than some from the west, he still falls beneath the Spartans. Having now had practice in dealing with chariots, the Spartans easily take them down when they come racing down the streets towards the plaza. And while the chariots may have gotten some lucky shots in, the Spartans got more. Two chariots remained, flailing around the plaza, knocking down Spartans without care. Their rampage is quickly put to an end by some no-nonsense marching Spartans. The Spartans surrounded the remaining two Nile spearmen, corralling them into a triangular arena. A single Spartan stepped forth to take down the two Egyptians, his fellow soldiers cheering him on in the fight to the death. One goes down, but his fellow Egyptian takes down the Spartan retaliation. Wow, now he just had to go and ruin the game, didn't he? With the arena battle now cut short, the Spartans converge on the Egyptian, killing him with no effort. With the last of the Egyptian garrison cleared out, Dymas captures the city and exterminates the clearly unhappy people. Even with a good chunk of the population gone, the people of Tarsus were still not happy. Dymas lowers the taxes and goes about replacing the Temple of Osiris with a much more suitable shrine to Athena. Xanthippus makes it to Sparta, but he would not be stopping there like his younger brother. Even a year out from making landfall, he had fallen too far behind the schedule. In the winter of 219 BC, Hero continues his journey to Massilia. He stops before crossing the border. Amnestos leaves the army to scout the nearby lands for mercenaries to send south to his brother. Yes, Cretan archers would do quite well. The father and son continue their journey, and the Cretans head south for Tarsus. With new infrastructure and time for the people to get used to their new rulers, Dymas is able to leave Tarsus. His spy goes ahead for Antioch, slipping through its walls and revealing its garrison. Dymas makes for the Egyptian city, stopping before the bridge that leads to it. Now in new lands, he scouts out the local mercenaries. Now, war elephants could be very interesting. The exotic animals were a true curiosity to Dymas, and he simply just had to have them. He disbands his severely injured units of Cretans and hires the elephants, very eager to see how they will perform in the field. With his army now sorted, Dymas puts Antioch under siege. The gates were open, but the city was surrounded by a wall. In addition, the city did host a sizable garrison, so just running through the gates would not be as easy as last time. Dymas would have to take some time to decide the best approach. Xanthippus, decidedly sick of boats by this point, was very pleased to hear that at the turn of the summer, he and his army would finally be off these blasted boats. In Italy, Philotas of Thessalonica moves north to Arretium and picks up the army that had been waiting there. He plots a course west towards the pass that separated Gaul lands from Greek. And to the east, Hero's agents finally catch up with their commander, ready to deal with Massacre on the dawn of the new year. Okay there guys, thank you all for watching. I apologise about the delay, but life happens and all of that. If you haven't seen it, I go into more detail about it in the July update video. I'm also considering doing some quick little let's plays of various games throughout the week to work as filler and to be able to play some of the games in my library that I have yet to do so. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!